Have you ever watched your own father stand up at your graduation dinner, raise his glass, and tell a room full of people that you are not his son anymore? I was 24. I was still wearing the gown. He said it the way you'd read a verdict. That I had forged my grandfather's signature. That I had stolen from this family. And that a man like that did not get to sit at his table. My older brother, Trevor, had his phone up before our father finished the sentence. Filming. So it would follow me for the rest of my life. The room clapped. Not for me. For him. Hotel security put a hand on my shoulder, and I stood up before they could pull the chair out from under me, and I buttoned the gown, and I looked at my father and said the only thing I said all night. Keep going. I kept all of it. Then I walked to the doors on my own. What none of them knew, not the guests, not Trevor, not the man at the head of the table who had just called me a thief, was that for 2 years I had been quietly keeping every receipt, every bank slip, and the original papers my grandfather pressed into my hands before he died. And that on my way out those doors, I made one phone call. To the one man my grandfather had told, before he was gone, exactly how this night was going to end. The dinner was on the top floor of a hotel downtown, in a ballroom with a low ceiling full of little recessed lights and a carpet thick enough to eat the sound of a dropped fork. There were about 60 people in it, round tables, white cloths, a card at every seat with a name printed on it in gold. Mine said Aaron, no title, because my father had ordered the cards and my father did not think I had earned one. There was a head table at the front, longer than the rest, and he sat at the center of it with his second wife on one side and my brother on the other. And there was a full glass of red in front of him that he had not touched all evening. I remember noticing that. A man who does not drink his wine is a man waiting to raise it. He tapped the side of the glass with a knife just as the plates were being cleared, and the room settled the way a room does for someone it respects. He stood. He is a big man, my father, and he knows how to fill the front of a room, and when he started talking his voice was warm, which is the part people always forget about him. He can be very warm.
Before the dessert comes out, I'd like to say a few words. Most of you have known this family a long time. You knew my late wife. You watched these 2 boys grow up, some of you, since they were small enough to fall asleep under this very kind of table. And you came here tonight because one of them finished school. That is a real thing, and it deserves a glass.
People smiled. A woman 2 tables over pressed her hand flat to her chest, the way you do when something is about to be sweet. I sat there with my hands in my lap, and I let it come, because I already knew what shape it was going to take. He held the glass a beat longer than the sentence needed. Then his voice changed. It did not get louder. It got flatter and cleaner, and that was worse.
I'm not going to stand in front of the people who trusted me with their evening and hand them a lie along with the coffee. You deserve more than that. Walter deserves more than that. And Walter is the reason I can't let tonight go the way it was printed on the invitation.
That was the last warm second in the room. I watched it leave his face like a light being carried out of a hallway.
Every one of you watched what this family put into that young man. The schools, the chances. Doors that most people knock on their whole lives, held open for him because of the name on the invitation. I don't bring that up to be thanked for it. I bring it up so you understand exactly what he decided to do with all of it.
Nobody moved. 60 dessert forks lay untouched at 60 places. He waited until he was sure he had the quiet, and then he spent it.
The young man sitting at that table forged my father-in-law's signature. He took money out of this family, out of the estate of the man who raised him, while that man was in the ground and could not say a single word to defend himself. I understand what night this is. I understand what I'm doing to it. But a thing like that doesn't sit and wait politely for a better evening to become true.
He let that stand there in the open for a moment. He was in no danger of being interrupted.
You all knew Walter. You know the kind of man he was. The most careful man any of us ever met. He didn't hand his trust to just anybody. And the one person in this family he decided to hand it to is the one who took from him while the old man wasn't there to watch it happen. That is what I brought all of you here to hear tonight, whether I wanted to say it out loud or not.
Somewhere behind me a chair scraped. Nobody laughed the way people laugh when they think it's a joke, because his voice did not leave room for that. He let the silence work for him. He was good at silence. He turned his head and looked straight at me for the first time, and everyone at every table turned with him, 60 faces swinging toward a card that said, Aaron with no title on it.
You can sit there and look at me like I'm the one doing something wrong. Go ahead. I've watched you wear that face for months. But not one person in this room reached over and moved those numbers to where they ended up. You did that. And then you were going to sit here in front of these people tonight and let every one of them stand up and clap for you and say nothing at all.
I said nothing. He waited a beat for me to hand him something he could knock back down, and I didn't. And I watched him decide to use even that against me.
Nothing. There it is. You never did have a word to say when it counted. You'd go quiet and let a thing run and count on nobody ever getting up to look. Well, I looked and I know how this must play to some of you. A father doing this to his own child at a dinner over dessert. I would sooner have every person in this room walk out of here tonight thinking I am a cruel man than let one of you keep believing he is something he is not. That much I owe Walter, and I am paying it in front of witnesses.
He set the glass down without drinking from it. He straightened his jacket. And then he said the sentence he had come here to say, the one I think he had said to himself in a mirror more than once, because it came out too smooth to be the first time.
So I'm going to say this once out loud in front of the people who have noticed, so nobody can ever tell you I whispered it behind a door. You are not my son anymore. You don't sit at my table. You don't stand under this family's name. And you don't get to look these good people in the eye and go on pretending the last 2 years didn't happen.
And the room clapped. I want to be exact about that, because it is the part that took me the longest to put down. It was not one or two people being polite. It moved across the tables like weather, table to table, a soft rolling wall of it. Hands I had shaken at the door an hour earlier, hands that had wished me well and asked what I was going to do now that school was finished. They clapped for the man who had just cut me out of my own blood in front of a plated dinner. Not for me, for him. My father lifted his chin a little and took it, the way you take something you feel you have coming. Trevor did not clap. Trevor had better things to do with his hands. He had come around the end of the head table while our father was still talking, and he had his phone up, held sideways, framed, the little red dot of it burning. And he had walked halfway across the floor, so that he stood between me and the head table with the lens pointed down at my seat. My brother has always understood the difference between a thing that happens and a thing that is recorded. He was making sure this one got recorded.
Smile for the family, thief.
He said it low, just for the phone, a little grin under it, the grin of a man who has been waiting a long time to say a sentence and finally gets to.
Come on, look up. Say it to the camera. Tell all these people what you did to Grandpa. This is going everywhere, little brother. Every job you ever apply for, every person you ever meet, they're going to type your name in, and they're going to find this. That's the whole idea.
From the head table, my father lifted 2 fingers toward the back of the room, the smallest motion, a man used to being obeyed without a whole sentence attached to it.
That's enough now. Would somebody walk him out, please, quietly? He does not get to stand here and make a scene on top of everything else he has already done.
That was when the hand came down on my shoulder. Hotel security. A big kid, younger than me maybe, in a gray blazer that didn't fit him at the shoulders, and he clearly did not want to be the one doing this, and he leaned down and did not say anything because there was nothing to say that the room hadn't already heard. His fingers closed on the seam at my shoulder, and I felt the chair start to move under me, that small backward pressure of someone getting ready to pull it out so that standing would look like being lifted, being handled, being carried out of a room I had walked into on my own 2 feet. So I stood up first, before the chair moved. I got to my feet in one motion, clean, so that the hand on my shoulder had nothing left to hold, and the kid in the blazer straightened up with me and took a step back because now we were just 2 men standing. I reached up and fastened the top button at my throat, the way you close a coat before you go out into cold you already know is waiting. My hands were not shaking. I checked, because I wanted to know, and they were not. I looked down the length of that room, past my brother and his little red dot, to the head table, to the untouched glass, to my father standing there in the warmth of 60 people's applause, and I gave him the only sentence he was going to get from me. "Keep going, I kept all of it." I don't think he heard the whole weight of it. I don't think anyone in that room did. It landed like a threat with no teeth in it, 4 seats of people right around me, too far gone in the clapping to catch it, and my father's face didn't so much as flicker. And Trevor's grin got wider because to him it sounded like the last small noise a losing man makes on his way out. Which was fine. It was not for them. Not really. It was a receipt. I wanted it said out loud in that room, in front of those witnesses, so that later nobody could pretend I had gone quietly. Then I turned and I walked. I did not hurry and I did not drag it. The tables were arranged with a wide aisle straight up the middle, the kind they leave for a bride, and I took it, past the woman who had pressed her hand to her chest and would not meet my eyes now, past a man who had clapped me on the back in the elevator and studied the tablecloth as I went by, past a whole turning tide of faces that had decided what I was before I finished the salad. The security kid walked a step behind me the entire way, close enough to be official, far enough to make it clear he wasn't going to have to touch me again. The clapping thinned out behind us as we went, the way a wave pulls back off sand, until by the time I reached the double doors at the back it had gone quiet, and the loudest thing in the room was the sound of my own dress shoes on that carpet that ate every other sound. The doors were the tall kind, dark wood, brass handles, and they had been propped open all night for the servers. Someone had closed one of them. I pushed the other and walked through it into the lobby, and it swung shut behind me on its heavy hinge, and the ballroom sealed off behind that door like a lid coming down on a jar. 60 people and my whole family folded away into one muffled shape of sound. The lobby outside was a different world. Beige, bright, empty, a long run of patterned carpet and a bank of elevators at the far side, and the low electric hum of a building that does not care what just happened in one of its rooms. The security kid held the door for a second, checked that I was actually leaving, and let it fall closed. Then it was just me, 24 years old, standing in a hotel lobby that smelled like carpet cleaner, disowned, filmed, and thrown out of a party thrown in my own name. I stopped walking about halfway to the elevators, not because I didn't know where I was going, because there was something I had to do before the doors closed all the way on the night, and I had promised myself I would do it in the moment, while my hands were still steady before the shaking I'd checked for had a chance to arrive. I took my phone out of the inside pocket of my jacket. I found the name I had put in there weeks ago, a number I had not called once, a number I had been carrying around the way you carry a key to a house you don't live in yet. I pressed it, and I lifted it to my ear. It rang, once into that empty beige lobby with the party still murmuring behind the wall. That was the bottom. My hand was steady, and the call I'd made in the lobby was already ringing on the other end. The phone was still ringing against my ear when the lobby gave me its 2 choices. Straight ahead, the bank of elevators that would drop me to the street where a car could take me home, and that hour could be the last one I ever spent inside my father's version of things. Off to the left, a short carpeted run of hallway went back to a coat check counter with a girl in a black vest behind it. A man who has just been walked out of a room is supposed to keep walking, out into the night and the mercy of being anywhere else. I went left instead, deeper into the building they had thrown me out of because there was something in it that was mine, and I had put it there myself 3 hours before any of them lifted a glass. "Stay with me," I said under my breath to the ringing line, not to a person, the way you say it to a dog you need to hold still. It kept ringing. I already knew the man on the far end of it was going to answer before this was over. You would have to know one thing about me that no one at that dinner said out loud, because it did not fit the shape they had all agreed on years ago. I am the one the old man raised. My mother was Ellen, Walter's daughter, the older of his 2 girls, and she died the winter I was 9. I do not have many whole pictures of her left. What I kept instead was the year that came after, the year the house filled with relatives who did not know where to set me down now that the one person I belonged to was gone. There was an afternoon the next summer out at the lake when the whole family lined up on the grass for a portrait. I was 10. I started to step into the row, and a hand came down light on my shoulder and turned me gently to the side, and a voice I have never once been able to put a face to said it was just the family for this one. So I stood off at the edge with everybody's coats folded over my arms, because even at 10 I was already the sort of boy people handed things to hold. Then my grandfather stepped out of the exact center of the row where they had placed him, crossed the grass to the edge where I was, lifted half the coats off my arms into his own, and stood there beside me while the camera clicked on a family arranged neatly around the hole where the two of us were supposed to be. He did not make it into a speech. He simply decided, in front of all of them, where he meant to stand, and then he stood there. After my mother was gone, he took me on the way you take on a thing you fully intend to finish. Every Sunday, no exceptions, whatever the weather was doing, whatever else the family had going on. He was not warm in the way people mean when they reach for that word. He was exact. He noticed what other people let slide. He kept a deep drawer in his kitchen packed 40 years down with paper, receipts, letters, canceled checks, warranty cards, every one of them with the date set small in the corner. And on Sundays, he would put a stack of it in front of me at the table, and we would go through it together. This one worth keeping, this one out. Not because he was making me into anything. I never had a trade that would let me read a page the way a man who does it for a living reads one, and he was not trying to hand me one. He was funny about paper. Whatever mattered, he kept the original of it, and if you needed the thing, you got a copy off him, and he held on to the top sheet. The originals never left the house. "Vance," I said to the girl when I reached her counter. She looked up off her phone. "I left a folder with you before dinner. Brown leather cover, no name on it. Tickets right here." I laid the little brass tag on the wood between us.
The dinner's still going, though. She picked the tag up and turned it in her fingers without reading the number on it, reading my face instead. "You're him, aren't you? The one it's for. I carried a tray of waters up to that room an hour ago. You're really walking out on your own party?"
"I need what's in the folder," I said. "That's the whole of it."
"None of my business."
"No," I said. "It isn't. Thank you for asking it like a person and not like a story."
"Brown leather, no name," she said it half to herself. "It was the only thing all night that didn't have somebody's name on it. Give me a second." She did not go for it yet. "You know, I helped set that room this afternoon. 60 little name cards and 60 little holders. Yours was the only one printed with just the first name. No last name, no the graduate, nothing. I noticed because it seemed like a strange way to label the guest of honor."
"It wasn't an accident," I said. "My father ordered the cards."
"Well, for what it's worth, congratulations. Somebody in this building ought to say it to you tonight, and it doesn't look like the room upstairs is going to."
"You just did," I said. "That's more than 60 people managed over dinner. Take your time finding it. It's not going anywhere, and neither am I." Whatever was in my face kept her from asking the rest of the questions a person might reasonably ask a man, collecting one flat folder, alone, in the middle of a party thrown in his own honor. She took the tag and went back into the racks, and I stood at the half door with the phone still going against my head. There had been one Sunday near the end, though neither of us was calling it that yet, when he did not sit me down at the kitchen table. He took a thin stack of papers out of the drawer and pressed them into my two hands and closed my fingers over them from the outside, the way you fold a child's hand shut around money. Some of it was typed, some of it was in his own hand, the letters squared off and deliberate the way he did everything, and there were names signed along the bottoms, more than one of them, his among them. "What do you want me to do with all this?" I asked him. He did not tell me what any of it was. He said only to keep it somewhere dry, somewhere no one in this family would think to look, and never to let anyone talk me out of it, no matter how reasonable they made it sound. "And if somebody comes and asks me for them," I said. "Then that," he said, "was the person I was supposed to keep them from." He did not name anyone. He trusted me to know the face when it finally turned up asking for them. "For how long?" I said. "For as long as it took," he told me. He did not tell me a night like the one I had just walked out of was already on its way toward me, though I think now he could see it coming long before I ever felt the first wind of it. He was gone before that winter was fully out, at 79. 2 winters ago now. I put the papers in a drawer of my own and let no one talk me out of them, and at first that was the whole of it. I kept them because he told me to. That was reason enough. It stopped being the whole of it about 2 years before this dinner, when the numbers around my grandfather's estate quietly stopped sitting right. Money that should have been in one place was in another, or was in no place I could find. There was a fund he had set up years back with my mother's name on it, money he had put aside for whoever in the family came up next and needed a start the way I once had. And that fund went quiet, and then it went down to almost nothing. I asked about it once out loud at a Sunday table full of them, the first winter after we put him in the ground. "Where did my mother's fund go?" I said. "The one with her name on it. It was full in the fall. The statement came this week and it's down to almost nothing. Somebody at this table has to sign to move money off that account. So which one of you signed, and where did it land?"
That account is being managed, Aaron. There are costs to settling an estate that a man your age has never once had to think about. Taxes, fees, the quiet costs that come due the year a man dies. It gets handled quietly, because quietly is how a family handles its own business. And there's no call to lay your mother's name out across the table like a card you're playing against the rest of us.
"I didn't ask who manages it," I said. "I asked where it went. Those are two different sentences, and he spent 13 years teaching me the difference between them at this exact table. I know one when I hear it."
You hear him? The old man's been in the ground 3 months, and he's already going drawer to drawer looking for something he's owed. It's grief, Dad. Let him have it. He turned the grin on me. Nobody touched your college money, little brother. Not everything that goes quiet got stolen. Sometimes it just runs out, the way people do.
"It didn't run out," I said. "Things that run out leave a trail of where they went on the way down. This one just stopped clean in a single season. Show me one statement. One. Somebody here has the login, and it would take a minute to end this, and instead we're going to sit and talk about my grief."
There's no login to show you, Aaron. There's no secret statement sitting in a drawer somewhere. There's a dead man's money and a family sorting it out the way families do, in private, without one of the kids circling the table like he's owed a full accounting, because he's got nothing better to do now that school's let him out. You want to make this ugly? Keep pulling on it.
"I'm not pulling on anything," I said. "I asked a plain money question, and half the grown people at this table went quiet at the exact same second. That's not an answer, but it's information, and I'll take it home with me."
Take what home? There's nothing to take. The man's been in the ground 3 months, and you want to turn his own kitchen into a courtroom over a checking account. That's not grief, Aaron. That's a hobby, and it's an ugly one.
"He kept a record of every dollar he ever moved," I said. 13 years I sat at this table while he made me do it next to him. This slip we keep, this one we don't, the date in the corner every single time. The first season he isn't here to keep it, the whole record goes dark inside one quarter, and every grown person at this table wants me to call that ordinary. I don't.
So that's the plan. You sit here every Sunday going line by line through a dead man's accounts until somebody hands you a medal for it. Get a life, little brother. One that isn't built out of other people's mail.
"I don't want a medal, and I don't want the money," I said. "I never once asked for a share. I asked where my mother's fund went, the one with her name across the front of it, and that answer cost nobody at this table a single dollar to give me. It cost something else, or one of you would have given it already. So I'll remember who couldn't finish a sentence at a plain table on a plain Sunday. That's not a threat. It's just the kind of thing I keep."
This is not the night for it. It is never going to be the night for it, not if you keep carrying it to my table like a bill collector in a good shirt. Your grandfather trusted the people in this room to sort his affairs. You might try a little of that same trust. Now eat before it goes cold.
And that was the whole of what I got. That Sunday and every Sunday after it. The question passed hand to hand around the table like a hot dish nobody wanted to hold and set down in front of no one. That was the day I stopped asking out loud and started keeping the answers in writing. I did not need a word for it to see that a careful man's affairs had stopped being careful the very season he was no longer standing over them. So I kept my own copies. Every statement, every receipt, every slip with a date and a figure on it, marked in the corner the way he had taught me, and dropped into the same folder that already held his pages. I did not know yet what it added up to. I only knew that as long as I held my own copies, no one could ever stand across a table from me and tell me to my face that a thing had simply never happened. A few weeks before the graduation, An envelope came that I had not gone looking for. A plain window envelope from a fraud unit at one of the banks, and inside it a single page with a case number printed across the top and a few flat sentences saying they had opened a file on activity tied to the family accounts and might be in contact. I read that one all the way to the bottom, twice. I did not understand how far along they already were. I understood only that somewhere out there, without my having asked a soul for it, a second set of eyes had started moving over the same numbers that had stopped sitting right for me. I slid that letter into the folder too behind his pages, and I told no one it had come. Not my father, not my brother, not one guest who would later put their hands together for the speech. It existed for me and nobody else. That folder was what I had come back through the building to collect. The girl set the leather cover and my overcoat both on the counter. "Just the folder," I said. "Leave the coat. I'm not going anywhere yet." I opened the cover far enough to count that all of it was still inside. His pages and mine, the receipts, the letter with the case number. And it was. Every sheet of it. I had checked it at the door that evening like a program for the night, and then gone in to eat at a dinner held in my own name, carrying nothing on me at all, because some part of me had already counted the odds of walking back out of that room as the same man who walked in. I had spent 2 years quietly getting ready for a fire, and now that it had finally caught, I was not going to stand in the doorway and watch it burn. I unfastened the button I had done up in front of 60 people, slid the whole thing flat against my shirt beneath the gown, so that the very thing they had thrown me out of that room for supposedly stealing was riding directly over my chest, and no one who looked straight at me would have had the first idea it was there. The papers my grandfather pressed into my hands were not the ones they were accusing me of. They never had been, not for a single day. I stood in that quiet hallway with a dead man's pages flat against me, and the call I had placed down in the lobby still going out on the far end of the line, a phone somewhere across town that had been waiting 2 winters to ring, that was ringing now, and that no one had picked up yet. None of what happened in that ballroom was the beginning of it. The beginning came a few weeks earlier, on a plain weekday afternoon, at the long table in my father's dining room, the one the family only ever sat at for holidays. He had called me the night before and said he wanted to talk something through, just the 2 of us, a family thing, nothing to worry about. My father saying nothing to worry about is the closest thing our family has to a storm siren. But I went. You go. 13 years of Sundays with a careful man had taught me that you show up, you read the room, and you decide nothing until you have. I wanted to see the room. The curtains were half drawn against the light, which was the first thing that was wrong, because my father liked light in a house the way some men like it loud. The second thing that was wrong was my brother. Trevor was already there when I came in, sitting on my father's side of the table instead of across from it, a glass of something amber in front of him at 3 in the afternoon, and he did not get up. A talk between 2 men does not usually have a third one seated on one side of it before the first one arrives. I understood, before anybody had said a word, that I had not been called to a conversation. I had been called in front of a bench. There was a single sheet of paper face down on the table in front of the empty chair they had left for me, and a pen laid across it at a careful angle, set out the way you set out a thing you expect a man to use before he knows what it is for. I did not sit right away. My father waved a hand at the chair the way he waves at everything, as though the chair should feel lucky.
"Sit down, Aaron. Nobody here wants a fight. Sit down and let me talk to you like a grown man, which is more courtesy than most of this family is prepared to show you right now."
I sat. Not because he told me to. Sitting let me see both of their hands at once, and I wanted to see their hands.
"I'm going to give it to you straight, because you and I have never once gotten anywhere pretending. Money is gone from your grandfather's estate, a great deal of it. Papers have turned up carrying Walter's name, signed after the old man was already in the ground, by somebody who could put his signature at the bottom of a page well enough to move money on it, and there is exactly one person he ever trusted with his papers. One person with the keys and the run of that house and the benefit of every doubt. I have turned this over every way a man can, son, looking for another door to walk it through. It keeps stopping at yours.
He said all of it in one even tone, the tone of a man reading items off a list at a counter, and that was the part that told me the most. A father who has just found out his son robbed a dead man does not sound like a grocery list. He sounds like a wound. My father sounded like a decision that had been reached in some other room on some earlier day and closed before I ever walked through his door. He was not learning anything at that table. He was informing me of a conclusion, and he had brought a witness to watch him inform me. "You've had eyes on those accounts since spring," I said. "That is a long time to watch a man rob you blind and still set him a place at the table every Sunday. What changed?"
What changed is that I ran out of ways to read it that let you go on being my son. I looked for them. You have no idea in the world how hard I looked.
"You didn't look," I said. "You decided, and then you went hunting for paper that agreed with the decision. There is a difference between those two things. He spent 13 years teaching me the difference."
Do not put his name in your mouth at this table. You do not get to stand behind Walter, not after what you did to him with his back turned and his name forged onto paper he never touched. That is the one place left in this world you have lost the right to stand.
You want to know what this has done to him? Do you have the first idea? I am the one who had to sit across from our father and make him look at it. I said, "Dad, I know what he is to you. Look at it anyway." Do you understand what it cost me to be the one who made him look?
Trevor has a talent I have never had, which is the ability to walk into a room to hurt somebody and be the injured party by the time he sits down. He had been dry-eyed since I came in, and now a shine came up in his eyes right on cue, and he leaned back and pressed the heel of his hand up under one of them, holding himself together for the good of the family.
You are doing it right now. That face, that exact face is the thing I described to him. He sits there like butter would not melt, and the whole time his hand has been in the old man's pockets.
Here is the thing they were counting on me never to say out loud, so I will say it here. My brother was drowning. Everyone in the family knew it, and everyone in the family had agreed, in the wordless way families agree, not to know it. 2 of his ventures had folded inside a few short years, one of them loudly. There were men he owed the kind of money that does not come with a second notice. The winter before, my father had quietly made one of Trevor's problems disappear and told nobody, except that in a family there is no such thing as telling nobody. And my grandfather's estate, the careful stack of everything the old man had spent a whole life setting straight, was the one deep well left on the property with anything still in it. So I understood the shape of what was happening at that table, even sitting in the middle of it. If money was gone from that estate, then sooner or later somebody was going to open the books and ask out loud where it had gone. And they were not going to answer that question. They were going to make sure that by the time anyone thought to ask it, the room already had a thief to point at, named early and named loud, so that opening the books would stop being a question about this family and become the proof of what the thief had done. I was not being accused because they believed I was guilty. I was being accused because I was useful, because I was quiet, and I had no lawyer, and there was not one person in that family who would stand up and be counted beside me, and all of that together made me the safest person in the house to hang it on. My father reached over and turned the single sheet face up so it pointed at me. It was a statement, typed, clean, a few short paragraphs standing over a signature line with my name printed underneath it. I did not pick it up. I read it upside down from where it sat, which was right side up to the 2 of them, and in its careful little sentences, it had me acknowledging certain irregularities, wishing to make the family whole, stepping back from any claim or role in the estate, and raising no objection to whatever arrangements my father judged best. It never once used the word thief. It did not need to. Every line in it was a narrow door that opened one way only, and on the far side of all of them stood a version of me who had confessed the whole thing by putting his name under a line.
Sign it, and this never leaves this room. You keep your name, you keep whatever future you have built, and this family is spared the sight of one of its own being taken apart where people can watch. That is not a threat. It is the kindest door anybody is ever going to hold open for you. Fight me, and the version that happens out in the daylight takes all of it. The name, the schools, every good memory a single person still carries of you.
I looked at the page long enough that Trevor began to shift in his chair because my brother cannot sit inside a silence he did not plan for. Then I put one finger flat on the top edge of the sheet, and I slid it back across the table, unhurried, the whole distance it had traveled to reach me, and I left the pen lying exactly where it lay, untouched. And I folded my hands on the wood in front of me. I did not raise my voice. I did not tell them they were lying. They knew that already, and saying it out loud would only have told them which parts of the lie frightened me. I asked the one question a guilty man never asks. Which account?
Excuse me?
You said money left the estate. Money that leaves one account lands in another. So name them. The one it left and the one it landed in. Read them off, whatever you have been staring at since spring, out loud right here, and I will pick up your pen and sign anything you want. It was a small thing, what happened next. And if I had not been watching their hands and their faces the way the old man drilled me to watch, I would have walked right past it. My father's face did not move. But there is a stillness a man goes into while he chooses a word he had not planned to need, and he went into it, half a second of nothing, the smallest catch in a man who did not catch. And into that half second, before my father could fill it himself, Trevor answered. Fast, too fast, the way your hand shoots out after a falling glass before you have decided to reach.
There is nothing to read. There is no account, there is no list, there is nothing to open. You do not get to sit at this table and cross-examine us like you are the one who got wronged here. It is done, Aaron. It is already done. It is handled.
What my son means is that the accounting is finished, and there is no hour left in your life where you get to sit and audit your own family. The paper is in front of you. That is the whole of what is on offer.
My father shut his eyes for a quarter of a second, which from him was the same as another man dropping his whole face into his hands, and then he papered over Trevor with that even, closing sentence a half-beat too late for it to work. Because Trevor had already handed me the one thing they had drawn the curtains to keep from me. He did not shout that there was nothing to open because there was nothing to open. He shouted it because something was straining very hard to stay shut, and he had just kicked it an inch off the latch. There was an account. They knew precisely which one it was, and the entire purpose of the pen and the statement and the dimmed afternoon was to get my name onto that page before I ever got my eyes onto that account. I stood. I left the statement where I had pushed it and the pen where it lay, the two of them stranded in the middle of that table like a hand nobody was going to play. My father did not tell me to sit back down. I think he understood that the afternoon had slipped him, that he had brought me into that room to close something, and it had come open in his hands instead. Trevor was still going as I crossed the length of his father's dining room to the door, saying my name, saying I was making a mistake, saying I would regret this the rest of my life, all the things a man says when the script he wrote for the afternoon has stopped taking his direction.
Think very carefully about the next few weeks, Aaron. Think hard about who is going to be standing next to you when this is out in the open where everyone can see it. Count the names on your side of it. I have already counted mine.
That was the truest thing either of them said to me all afternoon. And it was also the only real mistake my father made in that room. He meant it to frighten me, to send me home to count my friends and find that I had none. What he did not understand, standing there in his own dim dining room with a pen abandoned on his table and his firstborn breathing hard beside him, was that I had already been counting for 2 years. And I was not counting names. I was counting pages, and I had every one of them. They thought they were closing a trap on me that afternoon. 2 men, a drawn curtain, a pen laid out like a gift. They were so certain of the trap that not one of them ever stopped to ask the single question that should have kept them awake that night and every night after it, right up until the doors of a ballroom swung shut behind me. Why the man they had cornered, the quiet one, the one with no lawyer and no allies and not one line prepared, sat so calm in that chair while they did it. They did not send a lawyer after that afternoon in the dining room. For a few days I kept my phone where I could see it and waited for a letter with a firm's name across the top, and none came. What came was quieter, and it worked better. A man who fails to close a trap in a room with one witness goes looking for 60. My father stopped trying to get my name onto a page. He started trying to get it out of every mouth in the family that had ever said it with any warmth. It moved the way that kind of thing moves, which is to say I never once caught it in the open. Nobody called me to my face and repeated it. I only felt the temperature of a room drop a degree a week, the way you feel a season turn before you could name the day it did. A cousin I'd traded messages with for years took 3 days to answer a plain question, and then answered it like a man being careful on the record. An uncle who used to grip my hand at his door started nodding at me across it instead. I got the shape of what was being said in pieces, from the 2 or 3 people who were still more loyal to me than to the quiet. He hasn't been right since the old man died. Was one of them, softer than the rest and doing less work. He took money, and it's being handled inside the family, no one wants it ugly, was another cleaner, doing more. And running under both of them, doing the real damage, was the oldest one they had. That I had spent my whole life on the outside of this family watching Trevor stand in the middle of it and could never stand it. And that a person like that will do a great deal to change the picture. I went to the next family dinner anyway. Not going would have finished the story for them. See, he's cut himself off. Guilty men do that. So I put on a clean shirt and drove over and let them watch me come in the front door like a man carrying nothing. My father let me get 1 plate of food down before he set his fork across his plate and turned the whole table into an audience.
After everything this family did for you, we took you in when your mother was gone. We fed you, we put you through those schools, and next month we are going to stand up a room of 60 people and toast you like you earned it. This is the thanks. You sit at my table with your hands still wet from a dead man's accounts, and you make every one of us pretend along with you.
You keep saying we, I said. You mean him. Walter took me in. You paid the invoices he mailed you and called it fatherhood. He raised me at his kitchen table. You signed checks.
You hear that, Dad? You hear how he talks to you in your own house? We hand him one clean way out, and he stands here and spits on it. I sat in that dining room a couple of weeks ago and begged you to give him a door. I said he's still my brother, let him keep his name, let him walk out quiet, and he throws it back every time. I am tired of being the only one in this family who still bothers to try with him.
You want to know what's waiting for you out there, Aaron? People are already talking. That you haven't been right since Walter died. That the grief turned into something none of us can reach. That a boy who grew up at the edge of every picture will do anything to get himself into the middle of one. I have spent 2 weeks keeping the worst of it out of people's mouths. There is only so long a man defends a story he has stopped believing.
You've spent 2 weeks putting it in their mouths, I said, not keeping it out. I know the difference between a rumor that grows and one that gets planted in rows, and this one's planted in rows. Say the last part to my face sometime while you're at it. The part where nobody should be left alone with me. My stepmother sat at the head of that table beside him through all of it, and never once turned my way. When I stood, I caught Linda's eye by accident, and she moved her face to the dark window, like a woman watching for weather that hadn't arrived yet. I put my chair back where it belonged, and I walked out. And no one followed me except the one person in that house whose face had not cooled a single degree in all these weeks. Aunt Claire caught me in the hall by the coats. She was Walter's younger daughter, my mother's sister, and she had her hand on my arm before I reached the door.
I don't believe one word of it, she said. I wanted to say that out here, where the rest of them can't hear me be a bad soldier. My father raised you. I watched him do it, every Sunday for years. Whatever that room decided about you in there tonight, I wasn't in the vote, and I'm not going to be.
I would think about that later, that in a whole family voting me out 1 degree at a time, one person kept refusing to raise her hand. She was the only one who never once put her hands together for any of it. I told her I'd see her at the graduation, and I meant it. And I went out to my car. I was almost to it when Trevor's wife came out after me. Megan had married into this 2 years back the way you step onto ice you never tested. All confidence, and then very careful. And in the last month, she had wound down to almost nothing at these dinners, answering when she was spoken to and watching her own plate the rest of the time. She had a bank statement folded into a hard little square in her hand, folded and refolded along the same lines, the way you carry a thing you have taken out and put back a dozen times.
You keep things, she said. You always have. Everybody in this family throws paper in the fire the second it's inconvenient, and you're the one who kept his receipts from a lemonade stand, so just look at it. Please, does this look right to you?
I looked at it under the porch light long enough to know it was not nothing, and I folded it back along its own creases and pressed it into her hand before my face could do anything she would later have to account for. Keep it, I said. Make a copy tonight before you put it back wherever it lives. And don't tell Trevor you showed me, not that you showed me, not that we talked out here, none of it. She started to ask me what it meant. I don't know yet, I told her, which was close to the last fully true thing I said to anybody in that family for the weeks that were left. She went back inside to a husband whose eyes she had stopped meeting somewhere in that last month. I drove home carrying two things I had not come with. The shape of something in that statement I could not yet put a name to, and the plain fact that I was no longer the only person under my brother's roof keeping a folded page hidden from him. A few days after that dinner, I did the thing I had been circling since the envelope came. A plain window letter had reached me weeks before from a fraud unit at one of the banks. A single page with a case number printed across the top saying they had opened a file on activity tied to the family accounts and might be in contact. A man in my position was supposed to do one of two things with a letter like that. Pretend it never came, or take it straight to my father and beg. I did the third thing. I put the whole folder in the car and drove it downtown myself. The office was smaller than the letter had made it sound, 2 desks and a window with the blinds half down, and the woman whose name was printed at the bottom of the page looked up when I said it out loud. Hale. I set the folder on her desk and opened it so the pages faced her, 2 years of them, every slip dated in the corner, and I told her I was the one the letter had come to, and that I would rather walk it in than wait around to be asked for it.
Most people who get that letter do one of two things, she said, turning pages without hurrying. They call a lawyer, or they call whoever the letter is about and warn them so it all goes quiet. You're the first one in a while to just carry the box in himself. She stopped on a page, went back one, stopped again. Where did you get these?
I kept them, I said, as they came in, for about 2 years.
You kept them, she said, not quite a question, and she looked up at me then like I was a person and not a walk-in. Do you understand what you've been holding on to, or did you just have a bad feeling and a good habit?
I had a bad feeling, I said, and I was raised by a man with a good habit. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I can read these the way you can. That's the whole reason they're on your desk and not still in my drawer.
All right, she said. She took a card out of a drawer, wrote a string of numbers across the back of it in a fast, flat hand, and slid it across the desk to me. That's the file. It was open before you walked in today. You should hear that from me plainly. This did not start with you, and it does not close up and go home when you leave. Don't call the family, don't move money, don't move paper, don't warn anybody. If someone asks you point blank why you were here, you came in about a card you lost.
She kept copies of the statements, sealed into the case file. I kept the folder, his pages and mine both, because those were not leaving my hands for her or anyone, and I walked out with a card in my pocket that had a case number on it in a stranger's pen. For the first time since the dining room, the thing I had been doing alone for 2 years had a second set of eyes on it, eyes that answered to no one at my father's table. I did not walk out of that office knowing what the file would find, or when, or whether it would come to anything before the dinner or long after it. I have never been the man my father needed me to be for his story. The cold 1-3 moves ahead, the one who had planned every card face down on the table. I did not have a plan the shape of a machine. I had a folder, a habit an old man had drilled into me at a kitchen table, a case number on a card, and the sense that a thing I'd been carrying by myself in the dark had finally been set down somewhere with a light left on over it. What changed that afternoon was a small thing, and it was the whole thing. For 2 years, the record had lived in my drawer and belonged to no one but me. Now a copy of it lived somewhere my father could not reach in and make it never have happened. So in the weeks that were left, I gave them the only thing that would keep them moving in the direction I needed. I let them believe it had landed. When my father watched me across a room, I let my eyes drop first. When Trevor pushed, I went quiet instead of sharp, and I let the quiet look like a man out of answers instead of a man keeping his. I did not hire the lawyer they were braced for. I did not warn a single cousin off the story. I let the whole family settle into the comfortable version where I was already beaten, because this family, once it decided a man was already beaten, stopped being careful about where it chose to finish him. I needed them to do it in the open. A confession pried out of a man at a private table is his word against theirs, and theirs came with a house and 60 years of standing stacked behind it. But a father who stands up at a graduation dinner in front of everyone he knows and reads a verdict over his own son, that father has put the whole thing on a stage, under lights, in a room with doors that open both ways. I let them think the quiet meant they had won. The quiet was the only thing on earth that would make them do it in front of 60 people. The room believed him. That was the whole point. I had needed it to. What it did not know, while it put its hands together for the man at the head of the table, was that the report already had a case number written in a stranger's pen, and that my brother's wife had stopped meeting his eyes weeks before anyone in that ballroom ever lifted a glass. The cold under the hotel's front awning was the first honest thing that had touched me all night. I had come off the ballroom floor and down the length of the lobby without breaking stride once. The folder zipped flat against my ribs, the call I had placed on my way out of the ballroom still going in my ear, and I did not stop until the glass doors sighed shut behind me and the valet lane opened up empty and wet in front of me. Out here it was only the drip off the awning and a line ringing against a night that had gone very quiet. Inside, 60 people were settling back into their chairs after clapping my father through the end of me. Out here nobody was watching me at all, and I had walked straight into the middle of the danger in that before I saw it was danger. Because standing there in the cold with the line ringing, I almost killed the call. I will be plain about that, because the whole of what came after turned on how close I came. The oldest habit I have had exactly one answer ready for a night built like this one, and the answer was to go home. Let the record sit where it sat. Let the pages do their work in their own time, the way a true page is supposed to, without a man standing over them making noise about it. 2 years I had kept every slip without once raising my voice, and the same reflex that kept me quiet for 2 years had its hand on my arm now, telling me the safe thing and the dignified thing were one thing, and that both of them were parked out past the valet stand. I turned toward it. I got my hand halfway up to wave the kid over for my car, and I meant to go, and I would have. The glass door opened behind me while my hand was still in the air. A cousin of mine came out through it, a man I had traded easy messages with for the better part of my life, his own phone already up at his ear and his collar turned against the wet. He saw me. There is no version of that moment where he did not. I was an arm's length from him under a single bulb, with my hand raised in the light. He ran his eyes across me the way you run them across a coat rack, settled on some point past my shoulder, and walked on to his car without letting his face do one thing about me. I put my hand down. Behind him, through the lit glass, a knot of guests stood bent over a phone, and one of them threw his head back and laughed at whatever was on it, and nobody had to tell me what was on it. Trevor had filmed the thing so it would travel, and here it was, already traveling, room to lobby to phone, hardening one stranger's laugh at a time into the only thing any of them would ever remember me as. That was when I understood what I had been half a step from doing. I had been about to hand it to them. Not the estate, and not the name. Those were gone the second the room brought its hands together. I had been about to hand them the one thing the whole night had been engineered to take, which was my silence. My father had not spent weeks poisoning the family and staging a verdict at my own dinner because his feelings were hurt. He had done it because a quiet man with a folder, no lawyer and no one standing beside him, a man who trusts the truth to float up on its own, is the cheapest thing in the world to bury. The stillness I had carried around like it was strength was the exact handle he had reached down and picked me up by. Every minute I stood out here being graceful about it, the me on those phones said a little harder and give it a week and it would be set for good, and no page in any folder would ever be loud enough to crack it. So I quit thinking about what I was owed. That was the thing that had kept the old reflex breathing. Some small, stubborn part of me still wanted the table to turn around and make a space, still wanted to be waved back in and named a son. Asking to be believed, asking for a share, asking for a seat. Every one of those was the losing shape of the night, and every one of them left me a man standing in a driveway waiting on other people to change their minds. What I had against my ribs was not a request. In plain English, I had not kept those papers because I understood what was written on them. I kept them because an old man folded them into my hands and told me to. And it turned out the understanding was never the part that mattered. A page does not need me to follow it to work. I had the originals, and my grandfather had made me learn a phone number by heart for a night I had never once let myself picture, and I had already dialed it without reaching for it. I turned my back on the valet stand. I did not wave the kid over. I brought the phone up hard against my ear just as the ringing broke off, and a voice I had not heard since the morning we buried Walter came onto the line, dry and wide awake, and not 1 degree surprised to be hearing from me at this hour.
"I wondered if tonight was the night," he said. "Your grandfather always thought it would land like this, loud, and in front of company. Tell me what he did, all of it, and tell me whether there were people in that room to see it."
"About 60 of them," I said. He stood up at the head table, lifted his glass, and told the whole room I had forged Walter's signature and stolen from this family, and that a man like that does not get to sit at his table. Then he had security put a hand on me. Trevor filmed every second of it, and they clapped Mr. Reed, the whole room clapped, and not one of them clapped for me.
In front of 60 witnesses. He let a long breath out, and when he came back there was something steadier laid under the flat of it. Then he has finally overreached, which is the one move your grandfather always swore he would make the day he felt safe enough to. A man who accuses you quietly across a table can wake up in the morning, call the whole thing a misunderstanding, and half the family will thank him for his mercy. Your father stood up and said it to 60 people. He cannot take one word of it back now, and neither can they. Every soul who put their hands together in that room heard exactly what was claimed tonight, and none of that unhappens in the morning.
And I remembered it then, standing in that cold. The shape of what Walter had done in his last winter, which I had filed at the time under an old man getting careful and had never once turned over to look at from underneath. That winter he had started keeping me late after the Sunday meal. He would clear the table down to the wood and set a single number in front of me on a scrap of paper, 10 digits and a name, and he would have me say it back to him until I had it cold. And then he would take the scrap and feed it into the stove and watch it go. He did that 4 Sundays running. I thought he was losing the thread of things. He was not losing anything. He was walking me through a fire drill for a fire he could see coming and I could not, and Nathaniel Reed was the door he was teaching me to find in the smoke. "You keep saying he expected this," I said. "That's twice now. Why didn't he just tell me? He had years of Sundays. He could have sat me down and told me straight out what he thought was coming for me."
"Because he knew you," Reed said. "He knew that if you were carrying the whole weight of it, you would have gone stiff, and they would have read it off you years before tonight and changed the plan around you. He wanted you exactly the way you are standing right now. A man they are all certain has nothing, out in a doorway with everything. The not telling was the plan. 2 winters ago he came into my office and had me put a file together and seal it, and he told me that when the night finally came, the boy I raised gets the call. His words, not Gerald, not Trevor. The boy I raised gets the call, and Nathaniel, you make certain that boy still has the papers in his hands when he makes it. You are on this phone, so I already know you kept them."
"I did more than keep them," I said. "Weeks ago I carried the receipts downtown and put them across a desk in the bank's fraud unit myself. There is a case number on a card in my pocket right now. I did not wait to be asked for it, and I did not tell a single one of them I had done it."
"Of course you did," he said, and for the first time the dry went out of him and something warmer came up under it. "Then you have already done the hard half of this alone, which is precisely the half nobody expects out of the man they have all agreed is beaten. Good. Tell me where to come, and tell me what you want me carrying when I walk in.
Bring the file, I said. The sealed one. Whatever he built 2 winters ago, bring the whole of it and do not leave a page of it behind. When you get to the ballroom level, come in through the main doors off the landing, the tall double ones. Those are the doors they marched me out of a few minutes ago. That is the door I am walking back through, and I want you coming through it right behind me. Do not call ahead to the table. Do not warn one person you are on the way. I want the first thing my father learns about you to be the sound of your shoes crossing that floor. Through the glass and across the length of the lobby, I could see the mouth of the ballroom, and past it, small and lit, and a long way off, the head table, where my father had already leaned to say something to the man on his right. Easy, comfortable, the whole night running exactly the way he had drawn it up. A few minutes before, that table had been the entire world, and I had been a man being walked out of it with a hand on his shoulder. It did not feel like the entire world now. It felt like a room with a door in it, and I had just told the one man alive who could open that door which door to use. "What is it?" I said. "The file. What does it actually do when you open it?"
Not on a phone, Reed said. A thing like this only works the one time, and it only works if it happens in that room, in front of the people who need to be looking when it happens. If I tell you now, you will carry it on your face when you walk back in there, and the first man who reads your face will be your father, and he has spent 30 years reading faces at that table. So I will open it where he has to stand and watch me do it, and not before. 20 minutes.
None of it had changed yet, and I made myself hold on to that instead of the lift coming up in my chest. The room still believed him. Everything I had was still only paper zipped flat against my ribs, worth nothing to anyone until those doors opened and someone with standing set it down where the light was. But for the first time since he had climbed to his feet with that glass in his hand, the next 20 minutes belonged to me and not to him, and I could feel the difference in the ground under my shoes. Through the glass, I could pick out the security man who had put his hand on my shoulder a few minutes before, standing now with his back to the doors, done with me. Sure the night's one piece of trouble had already been walked out into the parking lot where it belonged. He had no idea he had held a door open for a man who was about to use it twice. I stood in the cold long enough to let the last of the shake work its way out through my hands, and I made myself picture the walk before I took it. Across the lobby, up the short flight to the landing, through the tall doors, into the light, and down the length of a room that had just clapped me out of it. There was no version of that walk that was not going to cost me something on the way across. I decided I was going to make it anyway, and I decided it standing there before Reed's car had even turned onto the road. I told him the doors one more time, so there was no missing them, and I told him I would be inside waiting when he came through. He said 20 minutes again, and I believed him, because a file that had sat sealed for 2 winters did not have to be hunted through a house. Then, right before the line went dead, he said one more thing to me. It was 6 words, maybe 7. And it was the reason the shake finally went out of my hands, and the reason I slid the phone into my pocket, turned my back on the empty valet lane, and walked back inside. The last thing Reed said before the line went dead, I carried the whole way across the lobby, turning it over like a coin I could not put down. It was not a comfort, and it was not a promise. It was an instruction, and it fit inside one breath.
Don't sign anything until I get there.
6 words to hang a night on. I had come back through the glass, braced to build my nerve up from nothing at every step, and instead, I had a rule I could hold the way you hold a rail in a dark stairwell. I did not have to be clever between here and the ballroom. I only had to keep a pen out of my hand. I came off the last of the lobby carpet steadier than I had any business being, and that was the moment my stepmother stepped into my path. Linda had spent the whole night up at the head table with her face turned to the dark window, and now here she was 3 feet in front of me, close enough that I could see somebody had sent her. She did not say anything. She was never going to. Talking was not the piece of the job they had handed her. She laid 2 fingers on my forearm, light as a place card, and tipped her head toward the low arch across the lobby where the hotel kept its bar, waiting to see whether I would follow. That was the whole message. This way. There is something around the corner for you, and it would go easier on everyone if you came quietly to hear it. A month before, I would have read that hand on my arm as a door easing open. The family reaching back. I knew the shape of it now. They had not sent the woman who kept her face at the window all night to walk me back into the fold. They had sent her because a soft face carries a hard errand better than a hard one does, and because I had loved her once and they were counting on that old muscle to still pull. I looked at the arch. Reed was 10 minutes out, maybe 15. Whatever they had built around that corner they had built to show me, and it was worth reading before they could fold it away. So I went, not because she asked, because I wanted to see the price on the tag before anyone got the chance to turn it over. The bar was dim and half full, a long, low room of people who had no notion what they were drinking next to, and Trevor waited down at the end of the rail with his back to the mirror. A folded sheet of paper sat on the wood in front of the empty stool beside him. A pen laid across it at an angle, squared up the careful way you square a thing you have practiced setting down. And there was a check, face up already, turned so it would be the first thing I saw coming around the corner. And he watched my eyes drop to it before he opened his mouth.
Sit down. Nobody's got a phone up in here, it's just us. I came down myself before this thing gets to a place none of us can walk it back from. That should tell you something, Aaron. I didn't have to come. I'm the only one left in this family still willing to sit in a room with you and hand you a way out that doesn't end with your name printed across a courthouse door.
I did not sit. He let that pass and kept his voice in the easy register, the wounded brother pitch he had been rehearsing at every dinner for a month, and he talked half to me and half to the check.
Here's the whole of it, plain. You put your name on that page. All it says is you're stepping back from the estate and you won't drag any of us through anything. And you take what's next to it and you're gone by morning. No lawyers, no fraud unit, no case number sitting in some drawer with your name on top of it. Dad pulls every bit of it back the second the ink is dry. The story dies. The room forgets you inside a month. And that number is real. It clears Monday. It's more money than a man your age has any right to see land in front of him at once. That's not a punishment. It's a head start. All you do is hand over what you've been keeping, and you walk out of here a rich stranger instead of the guy they marched out of the ballroom.
Say the part you actually came down here for, I said. The money's the money. What do I have to put in your hand for it? Walk me through every piece of it slow, so nobody's confused later about what got sold.
All of it. The receipts, the slips, whatever you've been squirreling into a folder for 2 years like it was going to save you. And Walter's papers, the originals, whatever the old man pressed on you before he went, wherever you've got them stashed. You bring me the whole folder, everything, nothing copied and nothing held back, and it goes in a fire tonight, and none of this was ever real. The old man raised you, and Dad let it ride. But this estate was never going to land in your hands, Aaron, and you know it. So quit holding a folder like it's a claim and let me hand you more than the claim was ever worth.
There it was, flat on the rail with a pen across it. Hand over what you kept, not the receipts. He would pocket those. But they were not why his father had sent his own wife across a lobby and his own son down a flight of stairs. What sat under every word of it was the folder riding against my side, the originals, the pages a dying man had folded into my hands one Sunday and told me to keep, back when none of them thought the nobody in the coat was worth a second look. For a month they had let me believe I was the beaten one, and the whole time the single thing that could sink them had stayed in the hands of the man they had already written off. Now they wanted it back badly enough to price it. That was the tell I had waited the whole month to see. They were not paying me to disappear. If they had really finished me, there would be nothing down here to buy. They were paying to make a page go dark, and you do not lay a number like that on a page unless the page can end you. And for one bad second, the ground tipped. He was right that the number was real, right that it was more than I had ever held, and there was a cold arithmetic running itself in the back of my skull with a whole warm way out lying face up on a bar in front of me. I could take it and be somewhere far off and heated by morning with nobody's hand ever landing on my shoulder again. The folder had ridden against my ribs so long I had half stopped feeling it was the whole war. And here was a man offering to lift the war clean off me for cash. That was the nearest I came all night to letting go of it, not out on the floor with a room clapping, here at a quiet rail, with my brother being gentle at me in the low light. Then I heard Reed again, the whole of him in one breath. "Don't sign anything until I get there." I did not reach for the pen. I reached past it and picked up the check instead, and I turned it flat to the light, and I read the number off it out loud, slow, every figure of it one at a time, all the way down to the last zero, so that Trevor had to sit on his stool and listen to his own father's fear read back to him in my voice. Then I laid it face down on the wood and left my hand flat on top of it.
So that's a yes. That's you being smart for once.
"That's me counting your zeros," I said. "You want to know what you just handed me? Not a way out, a number. This is what he'll pay to make one page vanish. That's the whole of what this is. Not to make me gone. A man they'd already beaten wouldn't be worth the postage. To make a page gone. And he was frightened enough of it to send his wife to walk me down here and his son to hold the pen and a fire waiting upstairs to feed it into. So go back and ask him what he'll really pay. The top number. The one he told you not to say out loud unless I wouldn't move. Because that number is the first honest thing anybody in this family has said to me in a month. And it's going to tell me exactly what's written on the page my father is this scared of."
It's a fair offer, Aaron. Don't be an idiot. This doesn't come around twice.
"Then make it unfair," I said. "Show me the ceiling. I'll wait."
There's no bigger number, Aaron. This is the whole of it.
"Then you'll go back up those stairs with nothing," I said. That reached bone. The easy drained out of his face, and the wounded brother act drained out with it. And what was left underneath was a man who had been handed a ceiling in a back room and told to keep it in his pocket. He should have stood up off that stool right then and walked. Instead, he did the thing a frightened man does when the script runs dry under him. He grabbed for the one lever he thought he still had a hand on, and he raised the number.
Fine. It's not the ceiling, all right? Dad told me take it as high as it has to go tonight, so double it. Double what's on there. You name a figure over that and I will call him from that hallway right now and he'll say yes. I already know he'll say yes. Just end it, tonight, clean. Before that folder ever touches another set of hands. Before anybody files one page of anything. Whatever it takes. He said whatever it takes.
He heard it leave his mouth about a half-second too late, the way you hear a glass go off the lip of a table before it ever hits the floor. Double it. Take it as high as it has to go. Whatever it takes. In 3 breaths he had told me the page was worth more than any figure they had trusted him to name, that his father knew it to the dollar, and that the clock ticking in that hotel was theirs and not mine. I had walked around that corner guessing, and I was standing there now with the whole of it confirmed in his own voice, and the only thing it had cost me was the small work of not picking up a pen. That was when the phone lit on the rail where I had set it face down beside the check. It buzzed once, and the screen came up bright, and a name sat across the top of it in plain letters with a single line beneath, and the line said only on the road. With you soon. Trevor's eyes went to it before I could have stopped them if I had wanted to, and I did not want to. I let him read it. I had told Reed to come in cold, the first thing my father learned of him to be the sound of his shoes crossing that floor. But a cornered table is a careless one, and I would rather have them scared than surprised. Then I turned the phone a few degrees toward him, so there was no mistaking whose name lay across the top. Nathaniel Reed, the man who had sat at his grandfather's right hand for the better part of 40 years, the name that in this house meant the old man's lawyer and every drawer Walter had ever kept locked, and it was on the road, coming here tonight. I watched it land on him. Whatever Trevor had carried down to that bar believing about me, that I was alone, that I was cornered, that a soft word from his father's wife and a check face-up and a pen across a page would be more than enough, all of it went out from under him in a single beat. He looked at the name. He looked at the check turned face down under my flat hand. He looked at the folded page nobody had signed, and you could watch him work out that he had come down a staircase to close a beaten man and had spent the last 5 minutes handing a standing one his father's whole hand, card by card.
You called Reed. You already called him.
I did not answer him. I did not have to. The screen had already answered, and anything I said out loud he could carry back downstairs and reshape into whatever he needed. Let him carry the picture instead, exactly as it sat, the check face down, the pen dry, the page unsigned, and Walter's lawyer on the road. He came up off the stool so fast it rocked on its legs, and he left the check lying where it was. He did not stop for it, did not so much as look back at it, and he went for the arch and the lobby past it at a pace that was not quite running and was not walking either. They had named a bigger number the second time. Trevor had bid against himself twice in 5 minutes at a dim bar with nobody's phone in the air, and sure men do not do that, frightened ones do. That told me what the page was worth better than any lawyer in the world could have told me. And it sent whoever they had sent, his father's wife's soft errand, and his own hard one both, hurrying back up to the head table to say the one thing that would turn their easy night to glass under them. He isn't leaving, and he isn't down here alone. Trevor took the stairs up to tell the table I wasn't leaving. I went the other way. That was the whole of my answer to the check lying face down on the bar and the pen he'd laid across the page for me. No word thrown after him, no step toward the ballroom, just my back turned and my shoes carrying me down the long carpeted spine of the hotel, away from the room and deeper into the part of the building the party never reached. I had come around that corner into the bar still guessing what the folder against my ribs was worth. I walked back out of it knowing to the dollar, because they had priced it for me twice in 5 minutes and bid against themselves to do it. And a man who has just watched his own blood put a number on a stack of paper does not turn around and carry the only copy of it up a staircase into a room full of the people who bid. That was the thing the quiet deal had pressed into my hand without ever meaning to. Not the money, the fear sitting under the money. They wanted the pages gone, and they wanted it badly enough to send a runner and a pen and a fire waiting somewhere upstairs to feed them into, which made the stupidest possible move with the next 10 minutes walking the originals back into a room full of hands already told to make them disappear. So I wasn't going to. I was going to make them impossible to disappear first. Then I'd walk in. There was a business center off the far end of the lobby, past the elevator bank and a gift shop shuttered dark. A small overlit room with 2 computers nobody was using and a copier breathing to itself under a long tube of fluorescent light. I'd walked past it coming into the hotel that evening without turning my head, back when the worst the night had for me was a toast and a photograph. Now it was the only room in the building I wanted to be standing in. I bumped the glass door shut with my hip, set the folder on the counter beside the machine, and opened it up. I did the plain thing first. I lifted out the pages my grandfather had folded into my hands one Sunday and told me to keep. The real ones. The co-signed family papers. The whole reason any of the rest of it mattered. And I fed them onto the glass a sheet at a time and let the light crawl under the lid. The machine slid a warm twin of each one into the tray. The point was never to hide the originals. It was to make sure they weren't the only copy of themselves left in the building. I'd just spent 5 minutes at a rail watching my brother try to buy them off me, and when that failed, try to frighten me out of them. And you don't need a lesson like that taught to you twice. So I'd walk the true pages into that light where they were going to do their work, a full copy folded in tight beside them, and leave a second full copy sealed somewhere no hand at that head table could reach before breakfast. It was the last 2 pages that turned the whole night over on me. I had the document they said I'd forged. The one sheet in the folder built for the single purpose of hanging me that I'd gotten hold of weeks back and kept for the reason you keep anything they build to bury you, because it is worth reading before somebody sets it alight. And I had the transfer slips beside it, the ones I'd been quietly setting aside for 2 years while the estate came up shorter every season than it had any honest reason to. I only meant to copy them. I laid the 2 of them flat on the glass together to fit them under the lid in one pass, and the scanner bar came up hard and white across both at once, and the dates lifted off the pages side by side like they'd been waiting the whole night to be read in the same breath. The page they said I'd forged was dated in March, a little over a year before that dinner. I read it off the corner twice to be sure the light wasn't cheating me, and it wasn't. March. Better than a year gone by the night my father stood up with his glass. And the slips under my other hand ran back 3 years, a straight line of money working its way quietly out of the accounts. The earliest of it long before that March, and none of it, not one slip, bending an inch in my direction. My father had climbed to his feet in that room and read the charge off the way a judge reads a finding into the record.
You put your grandfather's name on a page that was never yours to sign, and you've been taking from this family for years.
And Trevor had leaned across the table with his phone up in my face and laid his own line down over the top of it.
Smile for the family, thief.
Both of those sentences were lying on a copier under a fluorescent tube in front of me now, and both of them were dead where they lay. The name signed at the bottom of the page they'd hung me with wasn't shaped like anything my grandfather had ever set down. Not his slant, not his weight, not the way he dragged the tail off a last letter. I'd carried his real writing against my ribs for 2 years and could have picked it out of a stack in the dark, and this was somebody's hand, but it wasn't his, and it wasn't mine. So there was no signature of his on that page for me to have forged in the first place, and the money on the slips had never once moved toward me. 2 men had risen to their feet in front of 60 people and described, in careful order, a crime the paper on that glass said had not happened the way they'd told it, and they'd gotten a whole room to bring its hands together over it. And I knew whose name that was at the bottom of the page. Standing there with the scanner light going cold under the 2 sheets, I knew it, the way you know a voice through a wall before you've made out a single word. The date up in the corner had stopped being a date and turned into an answer to a question I hadn't known to ask. And it was pointing somewhere, and I was not going to stand alone in an empty room under a buzzing tube and say out loud where. So I put my hand flat over the page and let the rest of it wait, because I'd say it once on the white cloth where the glass had gone up, or I'd waste it here on a copier and it would land on no one. The phone lit against the counter. Read.
Tell me you're still inside. Tell me you didn't sign whatever they walked you down there to sign.
I didn't sign anything, I said. There was a check. I left it face down on the bar.
Of course there was a check. Nobody shows a man a number that sighs for something worthless. They showed it to you because the page in your hand can end them, and some part of your father is awake tonight, doing arithmetic he swore he'd never have to do. You left it lying there. Good. Where are you standing?
A back room with a copier, I said. Making copies before I carry any of this near that table. If somebody puts a hand in my coat between here and the doors, I don't want the only set in the world to be the one they come away with.
Then you understand this better than the men who built it. Your grandfather never once kept the only copy of anything that mattered. Doubles in 2 places, always. Make your sets. Leave one where their hands can't reach it, carry the rest, and get to those doors and wait for me. You do not walk into that room without me on your shoulder. Are we clear?
Trevor went back up to them, I said. He saw your name come up on my phone. They know I didn't leave, and they know I'm not down here alone.
Good. Let them sit with it. A table that thinks it's already won doesn't post a man on the doors. A table that's just been told it hasn't does. So move while they're still arguing over whether to believe him. Get your copies and get to the landing before someone with sense thinks to stand in that hallway.
The tall doors off the landing, I said. The ones they walked me out of. Come through those and don't call the table first. I want the first thing they learn of you to be your shoes on the floor.
I remember. I'm minutes out, 4 or 5. When I come through, you come in a step behind me, and you keep those pages shut and your mouth shut until the file is down on the cloth, and I'm standing where he has no choice but to look at me. Not a word before. Not the date, not the name, nothing. You've held it 2 years. You can hold it 4 more minutes.
Read, I said. The name on that page.
Save it.
He didn't let me reach the edge of it.
Say it once, in that room, with the right faces turned to it, or you spend it in a hallway on me, and it's gone for good. Whatever you found down there keeps 4 more minutes. How's your hand?
Steady, I said. It's been steady since the lobby.
Then keep it steady 4 more minutes, and you finish a thing your grandfather spent his last 2 winters, making sure you'd be standing right here to finish. He knew the shape of tonight before you did, who'd be lifting the glass, and who'd be holding the papers when it went up. And he made certain it was you. Don't hand that back over nerves in a corridor. Walk in like a man who was told this was coming.
He was right, so I put the rest of it back down where I'd kept it all night, and I finished the work. I ran the whole folder through end to end, the real papers, the accusation, the 2 years of slips. until I had 2 full sets of everything, the tray gone hot under the growing stack. One set I folded down tight and slid in against the pages I was already carrying. The other I squared off, worked into one of the hotel's own envelopes off the rack beside the printer, and sealed shut. Then I carried it back up the length of the lobby to the front desk and set it on the marble in front of the night clerk. "Hold this behind the desk for me," I said. "I'll come back for it before I leave tonight."
In the safe or just held, the safe I'd have to put a name to.
"Just held," I said. "No name on it. Anybody comes asking for it who isn't me, it was never here."
Then it was never here.
He wrote a number across the corner, dropped it into a slot behind him, and turned back to his screen. And it was done. Now, the same story sat in more than one place in that building, and the set that mattered most was sealed behind a desk neither my brother nor my father could lean on before morning. They could still strip the folder off me on the ballroom floor if it came down to hands on paper. They could not reach what I'd just left behind that desk. They could take every page I was carrying, and a clean copy of all of it would still be sitting 40 feet away in an envelope with a number written on the corner. It had stopped being a thing they could feed to a fire upstairs. It had become a thing they were going to have to stand in a room and answer for. I wasn't going to explain any of it in a hallway. Not to a cousin who'd look straight through me, not to a runner with a bigger check, not to 2 fingers landing soft on my arm. I was going to carry it back through the same tall doors they'd walked me out of, up the same short flight, in front of all 60 of them, and set it down on the white cloth of the table where my father had risen and lifted his glass to be finished with me, and let the date on it do to that room what it had just finished doing to me. I slid the phone into my pocket, folded the copies in tighter against the true pages, and turned back toward the landing and the tall doors standing shut at the top of it. The date on that page didn't match the story they'd sold the room. The neat, ugly little story of a jealous nobody forging a dead man's name the week of his own graduation. It matched something I still wasn't ready to say out loud, and I had the copies pressed in tight against my ribs and the doors already in front of me when someone stepped square into my path and stopped me where I stood. It was Megan. Trevor's wife had come up the service corridor the back way, past a rack of folded banquet chairs and a cart of stacked plates nobody had wheeled to the kitchen yet, and she had set herself in the middle of the passage so that I would have to stop or put her aside with my hands, and I stopped. She had her coat on over the dress she'd worn to the head table, buttoned to the throat, the way a person dresses who decided some while ago that she was not going back to her chair. For a month she had been the quietest body at every dinner, seated at my brother's elbow with her hands in her lap and her eyes low, and I had spent that month filing her under their side of the table without looking twice. 3 weeks back, she had come out after me into the dark of the drive and asked me, barely over a whisper, to read one line on a bank statement and tell her if it looked wrong. I'd looked at it long enough to know it was not nothing, and told her to copy the page and keep it somewhere and say a word of it to no one, Trevor least of all, and that I couldn't yet put a name to the whole of it. She'd gone the color of the cloth and folded it away, and until this second I had not known which way that quiet had finally tipped in her. Now I knew. She had not come down the back way to walk me out for them.
Don't go in yet. Give me 30 seconds, because I'm only going to have the nerve for this once, and I've been building up to it since your father got to his feet. She kept her voice down at corridor level, the pitch of someone practiced at not carrying through a wall. They think you're gone, the room does. Security walked you out, and nobody up front has said a word different to the tables, because a beaten man who leaves quiet is the version every person out there wants to be true. But it isn't the version up at that head table. Trevor came back up with no color in his face, and he's had his mouth at your father's ear ever since, and the 2 of them know you didn't drive home. They're only praying the 60 people between them, and these doors don't work it out before the night's over.
Then say your 30 seconds, I said. You didn't leave that chair in front of all of them to stand in a hallway and warn me about traffic.
No, I left it because of this. She brought her hand out from inside the coat, and there was a phone in it, screen dark, held low between us where the corridor light didn't reach. It's his. I lifted it off the table when he got up to go murmur in your father's ear. Everything's on it. The thing he shot of you tonight, start to finish, from the second your father stood, and the messages sitting under it. I'm not putting this in that room's hands. I'm putting it in yours, and I need you to understand I know exactly what I'm doing by it.
I did not reach for it. I had spent the whole night learning what it cost to grab too fast at a thing somebody held out across a dim room, and I wanted the reason out of her mouth before it was in my hand. So I asked the one question that had been sitting under her 3 weeks, the one the statement out in that dark drive had been standing in for. "Why now?" I said. "You've had that line 3 weeks. You've sat down to Sunday dinner with them every week since. Something moved tonight. What?"
Because he put my name on one of them. Her jaw set when she said it, a small hard motion, like she'd bitten down on the words 100 times in her head before letting them out. There's a transfer with my name typed across it. 1. Out of everything, 1 carries my name where his ought to be, and I only found it because you told me where to look. He set it up so that the day anybody ever pulled the whole thread loose, the first name their hand closed on wouldn't be his. It would be mine, his wife's.
"How long has your name been sitting on it?" I said.
Long enough that I've hated every dinner I smiled through. He kept calling it a formality, said it covered the both of us, said it was the kind of thing married people do. It covered him. That is the whole of what it ever did. It left me sitting on top of it so that the day it fell, it would come down on my head and not his, and he could stand there next to me looking as surprised as everybody else. So I watched them clap you out of that room tonight, and I sat there with a champagne glass in my hand, and I did the arithmetic on what I was going to be if I stayed in that chair. I was going to be the one holding it when the floor gave. He used my name so it would land on me. I'm done.
That was the strongest thing that had come to me all night, and it had come in a back hallway with nobody to witness it. Everything else I carried I had built or kept with my own 2 hands, and a man can always be told he built his own case to save his own neck. This was another thing entirely. This was someone from inside their own house, someone who had eaten every Sunday on their side of the table, getting up out of that seat in front of all of them, and walking the length of a service corridor to lay her husband's own night in the palm of the man they had all voted to bury. And none of it moved a single inch of the room. That was the weight that came down on me standing in that corridor with her, heavier than the hand on my shoulder had been 20 minutes before, because the hand had at least been something happening. This was the opposite. I could feel the shut doors at the end of the hall, the gold light of the ballroom leaking along the floor beneath them, and behind them, 60 people who had watched a man they'd trusted their whole lives. Name me a thief, and had brought their hands together over it and believed every word and would keep on believing it. Megan's phone. The folder pressed against me, the copy sealed behind a desk 40 feet the other way. The dates I'd read off a machine a few minutes before. Every piece of it was dark glass and dead paper until somebody the room could not wave off carried it through those doors and made it speak out loud in front of them. I could stand in this hallway holding the whole of it until morning, and the story on the far side of that wall would not shift off the spot my father had nailed it to. The proof was mine. The room was still his. So I stopped standing in the hallway and started arranging it instead. I did not take the phone from her. I folded her hand shut around it. "Keep it," I said. "Don't hand it to me. Don't hand it to anyone yet. You hold it, and you hold it right here, in the mouth of this corridor where it opens on the room. Not your chair, not back inside next to him. Here. If someone tries to walk you off this spot, you don't move. When somebody with the standing to ask for it puts out a hand, and somebody will, you'll be the easiest person in that whole room to find."
And if they come for me before that happens, she said, he's going to know it's gone the second he reaches for it. He'll know it was me.
"Then let him come the length of the room to find out," I said. "Every step he takes toward you is a step the whole room watches him take. You already got out of that chair in front of 60 people. There is nobody left in that room who can stand up later and swear you sat still."
Okay, I can stand here.
She put her back to the wall at the corner where the corridor gave onto the ballroom, the phone held down flat against her leg, and she stayed, planted in the exact stretch of floor the door light would reach. Now there was a witness standing at the mouth of the corridor with her husband's whole evening shut in her fist, in a spot the room could not miss. None of it was mine to swing with yet. All of it was mine to have in place when the doors did the thing they were a minute from doing. My own phone went hard against my palm as I let go of hers. One word on the face of it. No period after, the way a man types who is walking while he does it. Here. He was at the building. The 4 or 5 minutes he'd named on the copier had run all the way down to now, and the whole of the last 20 had come down to the next stretch of seconds, and where every eye in that ballroom happened to be pointed when a gray-haired man came through the doors. He had told me to hold the landing and come in a step behind him, folder shut, mouth shut, until the file was down on the cloth. I meant to keep the last of that to the letter. The folder stayed closed against me, and I did not have one word in my mouth for anyone in that room. But I was not going to stand in a dark hallway and let him walk into a floor full of backs, into 60 people faced the wrong way over their plates, while the one man who could end this crossed an empty carpet behind them and had to clear his throat to be seen. I wanted them already turned. I wanted every face in that room aimed at the doors before he ever reached them, so that when he came through into a room that was watching, and the only way I knew to turn a crowd toward a door was to put back in the doorway the exact thing they had all agreed to be rid of. So I pushed the door and stepped through into the light, and I let it swing to at my back, and I stopped a few paces inside on the open floor, where the head table down at the far end had a clean line straight to me, and I had one straight back to them. I did not slide along the wall. I did not hang in the shadow of the threshold waiting for a soft moment to let me in quiet. I stood out where the chandeliers could reach me, the folder up in one hand, closed, squared, held where they could all see there was a thing in my grip. Not opening it, not saying a word over it, just holding it up as a fact and letting the long room find me on its own. It took a moment to travel. The near tables caught it first, the way a draft crosses a room before anyone gives it a name. A head turning, then the two beside it, a fork going down, a sentence dying in its own middle, and the hush spread outward from the doors toward the front while I stood there and did nothing to rush it. They were not looking at my face. They were looking at the plain shut folder over my hand. The thing they'd been told for weeks was the proof of what I'd done, held up now by the man who was supposed to have been carried out of the building holding it and who was standing in the doorway with it instead. Trevor found me before his father did. He came up out of his chair at the head table so fast it rocked back on its legs, and he was already moving down the length of the room at me, fast, past the round tables and the first uncertain hands, playing every foot of the distance to the 60 faces turning to track him between us.
No, you do not get to stand there. His voice went out ahead of him, pitched to carry to the back of the room. You were carried out of this room, Aaron, in front of every person in it, and you do not get to walk back in and hold your little folder up over your head like it means one thing to anybody here. Put it down. Turn around and walk yourself back out that door on your own feet, because if they have to take you out a second time, it will not be one polite hand on your shoulder. Nobody in this room wants you standing in that door. Look at them. Not one.
I did not answer him. That last piece of Reed's order I kept whole. The folder up, shut, and not one word behind it. Let him spend the whole of that speech on me. He had come the length of the room to do it, in front of all of them, and there was not a face at any table turned anywhere now but toward the two of us in that doorway. That was the move, and it was the only one I made, and I'd made it the instant I chose the open floor over the shadow of the doors. I did not wait to be noticed. I did not carry the folder to some quiet edge and lay it on the corner of a table and pray a stranger bent down to read it. I stood in the one place the whole room had to turn its head to see. I held up the thing they had spent the night trying to price and grab and burn, and I let my brother leave his father's side and cross the entire floor to reach me, so that by the time he pulled up a stride away with his hand out for the folder, there was not a face at that head table pointed anywhere in the world but at the doorway I was standing in front of. My father up on his feet, the room half out of its chairs and starting to clap him along the way it had before. My stepmother risen with the rest, her face turned the same few degrees off me she'd kept it turned all night. And every eye in the place aimed down the length of the floor, at me, and at the shut double doors at my back. At the far end of the room, the double doors opened, and a gray-haired man in a dark suit walked in with a sealed gray file held flat against his side, and the applause at the head table died in the air. Nathaniel Reed crossed the floor without hurrying, set the sealed file down on the white cloth beside my father's glass, and said my grandfather's name out loud.
Walter. I drew his will. I hold the recorded copy of it, and 2 winters ago he sat across a desk from me and told me the one thing he wanted done on a night that looked exactly like this one. My name is Nathaniel Reed. Sit down, Gerald. You'll want to be sitting for the next part.
My father did not sit. He had spent the whole night up on his feet running the room off the sound of his own voice, and he stood there over the gray file with 60 people gone silent at his back and did the one thing he still knew how to do, which was reach for them again.
I don't know what this man told you at the door, but he is not on the guest list, and this is a private family dinner. Whoever let him in can walk him back out the way they walked that man out 20 minutes ago.
Nobody let me in. I let myself in, and there's a difference, and it's the whole reason I'm standing here. Your son called me from the lobby of this hotel while you were still enjoying the applause. He didn't ask me to save him. He told me which doors to use.
I did not wait for Reed to say the rest of it for me. I had carried the thing that mattered the length of that building and back with my own 2 hands, and I was not going to hand the last 10 feet of it to a man I'd phoned 20 minutes ago, however much I trusted him. I crossed the open floor to the head table, still wearing the gown they'd walked me out in, and I opened the folder flat against the white cloth, and I laid a single page down in the light where my father could not look at the room without looking at it first. March, I said, and I set one finger on the date up in the corner where everyone leaning toward the table could read it. A year before you stood up and called me a thief. Go on. Read the name written under the signature. He did not read it. He looked at the page the way you look at a snake in a path, the whole of his attention on it and not one muscle moving toward it. And I understood in that second that he had known exactly what that sheet was since the day it was made, and that the last thing on earth he wanted was 60 pairs of eyes going down to the bottom of it at the same time his did.
Put that away. You do not get to walk in here waving a piece of paper and turn this family's dinner into your own courtroom. That is the forgery. That is the exact document you signed his name to, and you have the gall to bring it back into this room.
It's a copy, I said. The one you're thinking of is wherever you keep it. I got hold of this weeks ago, and I made copies of it tonight, more than one, and one of them is sealed behind the front desk of this hotel with a number written on the corner, so before anyone reaches for it, there is nothing on this table you can make disappear anymore. Now read the name. I laid the rest of it out beside the page while I talked, so there would be no argument later about what I'd walked back in carrying. The co-signed family papers my grandfather had folded into my hands one Sunday and told me to keep. The 2 years of receipts and bank slips squared into one stack, every short season in the estate's accounts I'd set aside quietly. Since the first month the numbers ran the wrong way. I put all of it down flat, in the open, on the white cloth, where 60 people could watch my hands do it and no one could ever say the pages had come from somewhere they couldn't see. The page they had spent weeks telling 60 people I had forged was signed in March, a little over a year before that dinner, in my father's own hand. Not my grandfather's, not mine. His. The signature they had built the whole night around, the one he had risen to his feet and read into the record like a verdict, was the one signature in that folder that belonged to the man doing the reading. He had made the sheet himself, more than a year before he ever raised a glass to be rid of me over it, and he had sat on it and waited and let me walk into this room believing I was going to have to talk my way out of a thing he already knew I hadn't done. He had signed it himself. He knew. He raised his glass anyway. That was the part I had not let myself say out loud in an empty business center a little while before, because saying it meant standing in it, and I stood in it now with the whole head table turned toward the page. My father had not been fooled by anybody. There was no version of the night where a good man got it wrong. He had held a clean road in his hand, the truth, the books opened, the estate split the way my grandfather wrote it, and he had looked down that clean road and chosen the other one, the one that ran straight over the top of me, because the other one led everything into Trevor's hands before the floor gave out under the debt. He had picked which son to keep. He had done it in ink, in March, and then he had waited a year to do it out loud.
He asked me a question once, 2 winters ago, and I'll tell you what it was, because it's why I'm standing here instead of home in bed. He asked me what happens if a man ever stands up in front of everyone and calls the boy I raised a liar and a thief to strip him out of what's his. And I told him. And he had me write the answer into the will, and then he had it recorded, so no one could stand in a room and pretend it wasn't there.
Reed broke the seal on the gray file then, in front of all of them, and turned it to the last of its pages, and he did not raise his voice, because he did not have to. The room had already done the work of going quiet for him.
I'm reading the clause the way it's written. Any person named to inherit under this will who bears false witness against another named heir, who accuses that heir of theft, forgery, or fraud in order to remove him from what I've left him, forfeits every right of control this will gives him, and that control passes to the heir he tried to remove. Walter named 3 people in this document. He named Gerald, he named Trevor, and he named the boy he raised. Tonight, in front of this room, one of them stood up and accused another of forgery and theft to strip him out. That clause didn't wait for a courtroom to notice. It went off the second the words left his mouth.
Say what that means in the plain of it, I said.
It means the man who called you a thief 20 minutes ago no longer controls $1 of what your grandfather left. It means control of the estate isn't Gerald's to hand to anybody, and it isn't Trevor's to spend. As of the moment he raised that glass, by the terms your grandfather recorded 2 winters ago, it stops being his, and it starts coming to you.
The double doors at the far end opened a second time, and I did not have to turn to know it was not another guest. A woman in a plain dark coat came up the length of the room the same unhurried way Reed had, with a thin folder of her own and a badge she did not bother to hold up, because by the time she reached the light off the head table, nobody in the room was going to ask her who she was. She had not come because I called her. I had put receipts across her desk weeks ago and watched her write a case number down, and everything since had been her own track running under the night without any of us. She stopped a few feet off the white cloth, and she looked at Trevor when she spoke, not at me.
$110,000, 11 transfers over 3 years, and every one of them moving to the same account, which is yours, Mr. Vance. The oldest of them came out while your grandfather was still alive and still signing his own withdrawals, which is its own line on its own referral. The rest came out of the estate after he was gone.
You can't stand there, and there's a name on one of those that isn't mine. My wife moved money in this family, too. You want to read the account holder on the third one out loud? Go ahead. Read it. It doesn't say Trevor.
From the mouth of the corridor, where she had stood against the wall the whole time exactly where I'd asked her to, Megan stepped 1 pace into the light, with the phone held flat in her hand, and she did not say a word to the room. She held it out toward the woman in the dark coat, and the woman put out a hand and took it. And that was the answer to the question my brother had just asked.
He put my name on one of them. 1. He built it careful a long time ago so that the day somebody finally opened the books, the name still sitting on it would be mine and not his. It's all on there. The clip he took of Aaron tonight, and the messages. I'm done being the name he left holding it.
1 transfer carries her name as account holder. The money on it landed in yours, same as the other 10. That's not a second thief, that's a shield. It's the cleanest thing in the file, because a man doesn't build a shield unless he already knows the shot is coming. The accounts are frozen as of this evening. That happened before I walked through those doors, not after. I'm serving notice in this room tonight, so no one can say later they weren't told.
She set a single sheet down on the white cloth beside the page I'd laid there, and she did not make a speech out of it. She named it for what it was, a freeze, served, dated tonight, and she said the rest of it would move the way these things move, that the forgery and the false statement my father had read into this room and the money taken while my grandfather was still alive were going to the district attorney as referrals, that referrals are not verdicts, and nobody was being marched out of this room in cuffs, that what happened after tonight happened in the daylight, in front of people whose job it was to weigh it. She said Reed's clause was on the record as of the glass he'd raised, and that the actual stripping of control and the handing of it to me was for probate to confirm in the days ahead, not for anyone to declare finished at a dinner table. She laid it out flat and unhurried, one true thing after another, and it was somehow worse for my father than any shouting would have been, because you cannot get a room back on your side by out-talking a woman who is only reading dates. I looked at him then, really looked, the way I had not let myself do across that head table 20 minutes before when a hand was still on my shoulder. His glass was where he'd left it after the toast, tilted a few degrees against a fold in the cloth, the wine gone still and untouched, and he had not picked it up once since Reed said my grandfather's name. 60 people who had brought their hands together over me twice tonight sat with those same hands flat on the tables in front of them, and not one of them was looking at my father anymore. They were looking at the 2 pages on the white cloth and at the frozen glass beside them, and a few of them had started to do the thing a room does when it works out that it clapped for the wrong man and would very much like to not have been there when it did.
This is.
And that was as far as he got. There was no next word for him. He had walked into this room with the only weapon he'd ever needed, which was a room that agreed with him before he opened his mouth, and it had just been taken off him page by page in front of the exact people he'd borrowed it from. He stood over a tilted glass and a sealed file broken open and a woman reading his own son's account numbers into the quiet. And the man who had read a verdict over me at the top of the night could not find the front half of a sentence. He looked at Reed, and he looked at the badge, and last of all he looked at me. And I watched him understand that I had not come back into the room to win an argument with him. There was no argument. There were dates on paper, and the dates had already answered every word he'd sold this room, and he was standing in the one place on earth where he could not spin them. Trevor had gone gray behind his father, sunk half back into the chair he'd shot up out of minutes ago to come down the room at me, and he had stopped reaching for anything to say, too, because his wife was standing in the light with the woman holding his phone, and there was nothing on that screen that helped him. The whole head table that had risen twice tonight to clap a man out these doors sat frozen around a cake nobody had cut and a glass nobody would touch, and the applause that had walked me out of the room both times had nowhere left to come from. 14 years ago, somebody at a family gathering had waved a 10-year-old off to the side of a photograph and told him it was just the family for this one, and the boy had stood holding everyone's coats while the shutter clicked and the people who belonged arranged themselves without him. I had been thinking about that boy on and off the whole way through this building tonight without letting it up to the surface. He was in the frame now. His name was on the record at the head of the table, read out by the man his grandfather trusted, and every person who had once arranged themselves without him was the one standing outside it. I did not have anything to say to my father, and I did not stay to watch the room finish deciding what it thought of him. The reckoning was in other hands now. The clause on the record, the freeze on the account, the referrals moving toward daylight. And none of that needed one more word out of me to keep moving. What was left in that room that was actually mine was one person, and she was not at the head table, and she never had been. Down at a small table near the wall, the one who had sat through both rounds of applause tonight with her hands quiet in her lap and her chin up while everyone around her brought theirs together, was watching me across the length of the emptying room. I turned my back on the head of the table and on the tilted glass and the 2 pages and my father with no sentence left in him, and I walked down toward the only face in the place that had never once turned away from me. Aunt Claire had kept her seat at the small table against the wall through the whole of it. Both times the room came to its feet, and both times it went still, and she was still in it when I got there, her hands folded on the cloth the same way they had been folded all night. She was my mother's sister, the younger of Walter's 2 daughters, 52 years old, and she was the one person under that roof who had not once brought her hands together for anything that happened to me. I pulled out the chair beside her that somebody had left pushed in, and I sat, and for a moment neither of us said a word while the staff worked along the far wall stacking chairs, and a busser rolled a cart between the deserted tables collecting the glasses no one had finished.
"You came back in," she said. She was not looking at the head table. She was looking at me. "I sat right here and watched them walk you out that door, and I told myself you were not the kind to get in a car and drive home and let it be the end of you. And then the door opened, and there you stood in it with that folder up over your head like you had bought the building. I nearly got up out of this chair. I am glad I didn't. I would have given the whole thing away."
"You didn't clap," I said. "Not once, not either time. I saw you from the doorway on both of them. In a whole room going the one direction, you were the only thing in it that wasn't moving.
I was not going to put my hands together over you, she said. Not for him and not for that. Your grandfather never did learn how to clap for a thing only because the room around him had started, and I got that from him, and so did your mother, and the two of them ruined me for a great many family occasions. Ellen would have been standing in that doorway beside you tonight. She would have been louder about it than you and I put together, and your father knew exactly that, which is half the reason he waited until she was 15 years in the ground to try a night like this one.
That was the first time anyone had said my mother's name out loud in that room all evening, and Claire said it the plain way you say the name of someone you actually miss, without softening it or setting it down carefully. And something in the middle of me that had been held tight since my father first got to his feet came loose about a quarter of an inch. The room was going back to being a room. A hotel ballroom is a rented thing, and it does not keep what happens in it, and already two young men in vests were breaking down the far end where the head table stood, folding the long cloths off it and carrying the centerpieces out two at a time through the service door. A woman with a cart went table to table, pulling the little place cards out of their silver holders, the ones that had told 60 people exactly where the family had decided each of them should sit. In an hour, there would be nothing left in here to say any of it had ever happened. I found I did not mind that at all. I had never needed the room to remember. I only needed it to be finished. And it was finished. And what was left of it was a slice of cake and the one aunt who had stayed in her chair. A server had begun wheeling a cart toward the kitchen doors, and on it, under the low light, sat a cake nobody had cut, white, plain, a shade formal, a single line of piping around the base, and my name written across the top in the particular blue a bakery uses when the family asks them for blue. I had not thought about it one time all night. Somewhere in the shape of the evening there had been meant to be a cake, the way there is always a cake. And then my father had climbed to his feet, and there was no cake anymore, only a thing on a cart being wheeled off to the bins. "Leave that one," I said to the server, and he stopped where he was. "That one stays. Bring it over here."
He ordered that in the spring, Claire said, before the man had even set it down on our table. 2 springs ago. The year you know which year. He was not well, and he knew he was not well, and he drove himself down to the bakery on Fowler Street and picked out a cake for a graduation that was still 2 years off, and he paid the entire thing down to the last dollar so that not one person in this family would be able to cancel the order after he was gone. Even tonight, in this room, that cake is the one thing on the table your father never got his name anywhere near.
There was a card propped against the base of it, small and white, no bigger than my hand, and I knew the writing on it before I was close enough to read a single word. The letters squared off and set down one at a time. The same blue ink he had always used at that kitchen table on Sunday afternoons. He had written it 2 springs back and left it sealed with the bakery, to be stood up on a cake at a party he already knew he would not live to sit at. It was one line. It had my name on it. "Aaron," it read. "You were always mine." And under it, the way he signed a thing when he did not trust himself to sign it any longer than he had to, one letter, just the W. My father had stood up in front of 60 people a few hours before and told them I was not his son, and here at the bottom of the same night, from 2 springs on the other side of the grave, was the one correction that outranked him. Not shouted, not argued, set down and paid for in advance so that no hand alive could keep it from reaching me. I stood the card upright against the base of the cake where I could see it from my chair, and then I found the cake knife still rolled in a napkin at the next table over. "Sit with me a while," I said. "The car can wait. There is nowhere I would rather be tonight than at this table."
There is nowhere on this earth I would rather be than the one table in this room your father could not manage to clear, Claire said. "Cut me a real piece while you are at it. None of your slivers. Your grandfather never once served a mean slice of anything in his life, and I did not stay to the end of this whole business to be handed the edge of a plate."
So I cut into the thing my grandfather had bought and paid for and made certain no hand in this family could take off me, and I put a proper slice on a plate and set it down in front of Claire, because she was the one who stayed, and I cut a second for myself, and the two of us ate graduation cake at a cleared table in an emptying room while the staff took the far lights down a bank at a time. It was good cake. That is a foolish thing to have noticed on a night like that one, and I noticed it anyway, sitting there with my collar open and the card standing up in front of me and my aunt working through her piece beside me with no hurry in her at all. He had picked a plain one on purpose. Nothing fancy, no fountains of sugar, the kind of cake he would actually have eaten himself and gone back for a second slice of. Somewhere across the city, my father was pulling into his own driveway by now and starting the long work of explaining this night to himself in some shape he could go on living inside. I did not envy him the drive, and I did not spend one bite of that cake thinking about him.
"What happens to all of it?" Claire said after a while. "The estate, the accounts, whatever comes back out of Trevor's hands when this is finally through the courts. That lawyer stood right there and said it comes to you."
Some of it will, I said. The control of it on paper once a judge signs off, and that comes in the days ahead, not tonight. But the money they drew out of my mother's fund, the one with her name on it, that went quiet and then went down to almost nothing while nobody at any table in this family would give me one straight sentence about where it had gone. That does not come to me. All of it goes back into the fund, with her name still across the front of it, for whoever in this family comes up next, needing a start the way I once needed one, exactly the way he set it up before any of them got their hands in it. I did not keep 2 years of receipts, so I would walk away with a bigger piece of him than Trevor got. I kept them so the thing with her name on it would still be standing after they were done.
She would have taken that over watching your father go down, and it would not have been close, Claire said. Winning a fight never once in her life made Ellen happy. Being able to put her hand on a thing with her name on it and know it was still there, that she would have sat down at this table for.
Somewhere in the last stretch of it my father had gone. I had not watched him leave, and I did not turn to hunt for which door he had used. Trevor was gone as well, and the woman in the dark coat was gone, and Megan had gone out with her to set down in some quiet room the thing she had spent the whole dinner working up the nerve to set down. The head table sat empty at the far end under the lights, wiped back to the white cloth, the tilted glass carried off with everything else, and I felt not the smallest pull to walk up there and stand over the wreck of it. There was nothing at that end of the room that belonged to me. Everything that actually did was down here at a small table against the wall. 14 years ago, a family had lined itself up on the grass out at the lake, and a hand had come down on a 10-year-old and turned him gently to the side of the picture and left him holding everyone's coats over his arm, while they arranged a frame with no gap in it for him. I had been carrying that one afternoon around in the back of me the whole length of this night without ever letting it up to where I could look at it straight. It was up now, and it had gone strange on me. The people who had sorted themselves so carefully without the boy had all risen and left the room. The frame they built had come apart the instant the camera stopped pointing at it, and the boy they handed the coats to was the one still sitting inside the picture at the end of the night. At the last table with a light left on over it, beside the one of them who had stepped out of her own row to come and sit with him. Her father had done it first on the grass 14 years back. She was doing it now. I was still in the gown. They had walked me out of this room in it with a hand on my shoulder and 60 people clapping the man who put it there, and I had walked back in wearing the same one, and the man they carried out of this place was the one still sitting at the table after every last person who had done the carrying had gone home. Claire ate her cake, and I ate mine, and the card stood against the base of it with my name at the top and one line under, and every little while I read the line over again, because I had spent a long run of years in this family being told in 100 quiet ways that I was a guest in it who ought to be grateful for the chair. And here at the bottom of the worst night of the whole run was the one man whose word I had ever completely trusted, telling me from 2 springs back that I had never for one single day been a guest at all. I have gone back over that walk more times than I can count. The doors, the length of the floor, the room that had already made up its mind about me before I ever came through them. So I will hand it to you the way it was handed to me. If it had been you, if the whole room had already stood and clapped, if the people who were supposed to be yours had already turned their hands into a wall between you and the door, would you have walked back in? I picked up what was left of the cake, and my aunt took my arm, and the two of us went out through the same double doors together, and this time, not one person on earth had to open them for me. Until next time.